We are going to begin our look at language families by looking at the most widely spread family of languages on Earth and the most widely spoken family of languages on Earth. Do you know what language family that is? It is the Indo-European family of languages. The Indo-European family of languages are the languages that are spoken natively, that means as a person's first language. They're spoken natively by people from northern India through extreme Western Europe. Extreme Western Europe would be Iceland, and then throughout the Americas and several other places that I'll show you at least parts of. All of these languages are descended from one single common ancestor that's known as Proto-Indo-European. This language was spoken probably about 6,000 years ago. Nobody, of course, speaks it today. Proto-Indo-European then eventually evolved into all of these other languages that you're going to see momentarily. There's two basic ideas on how it spread. It either started in Central Asia, like around where Kazakhstan is at today, and then spread south and west, or it started in modern-day Turkey, although of course not in modern times, 6,000 years ago, and then spread to the east and to the west. Right now, I think the idea about the Turkish spread is the one that most people buy into, but this is not really something that's completely settled. There are 8 branches in the Indo-European family of languages. Here's what they are. The Romance branch, take a look at that word because I'm going to come back to it in a minute. The Germanic branch, the Balto Slavic branch, the Indo-Iranian branch, the Albanian, also known as Illyrian branch, the Hellenic branch, the Celtic branch. Yes, it's pronounced Celtic, not Celtic. The Celtics are a basketball team in Boston, and we Laker fans don't like them. This is pronounced Celtic. And the Armenian branch. The first 4 of these are large. Those are the ones I'm going to spend the most time with. The second 4 are very small. I will spend very little time with them. I found this on the internet, lifted this from the internet. It's a beautiful Indo-European and Uralic language family trees. Down here is the Uralic family. We'll get to that later on. Right now, we're just concerning ourselves with the Indo-European family, which I just circled for you. You can see all those languages are all in some capacity related to each other. We're going to start with the Romance branch, which you can see right here in the languages that are part of it: Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, and some others. The Romance branch is centered primarily in Southern Europe. Now, mostly in Southern Europe. So if you look at this map, you can see mostly where the Romance languages are spoken, and you'll see there's an exception to this. I want you to think about this. How do you spell the word romance? Okay, think about that. Now take off those last 2 letters, so you only have the first 5. That makes a word. What is that word? Okay, and that word describes a group of people that used to exist. Do you know what language that group of people spoke? Well, all of the Romance languages have an even more recent common ancestor, more recent than Proto-Indo-European. They have, as their more recent common ancestor, Latin, which was the language of the Romans. Okay? There are several language groups within the Romance branch. However, I'm not going to make you know those groups. I just want you to know these languages, along with Latin and the Romance branch, and put them all together and have them geographically tied together. Spanish, Portuguese, Catalan, which is spoken in northeastern Spain, French, Italian, Romansh, which I have mentioned before, spoken in kind of isolated areas of Switzerland, and Romanian, which of course is spoken in Romania. And of course, in the Western Hemisphere, these languages are also spoken, especially Spanish, Portuguese, and French. So you can see where the Romance languages are spoken in Southern Europe, plus Romanian over there on the upper right-hand side of this map. And then throughout the Western Hemisphere, you can see I circled where the Romance languages dominate. Now we're going to take a look at the Germanic branch. See, that wasn't that bad after all. You can see all these languages that are tied to the Germanic branch, including English. How about that? And of course, German. The Germanic branch is overwhelmingly the languages of Northern and Northwestern Europe. and of course in the Western Hemisphere with the US and Canada, plus Australia and New Zealand, and some other places as well. So if you see this map, this is overwhelmingly where the Germanic languages are spoken. Northern and Northwestern Europe, that's where they came from. And of course, in North America and Australia and New Zealand. There are several important language groups, once again, in the Germanic branch, but we're not going to worry about them. These are the Germanic languages I want you to know. German, English, Dutch and Flemish, which are basically the same language or very, very close to that. Icelandic, Norwegian, Swedish, Danish. So you can see, as I've mentioned at some other point in the class, that in Europe, many of the countries, most of them, have their borders drawn along linguistic lines. Now I just circled the Balto-Slavic branch. So you can see Russian is part of this. There it is. I know it's a little fuzzy. Sorry about that. The Balto-Slavic branch basically is the languages of Eastern Europe and Russia. So you can see it is these countries, these areas, overwhelmingly where you find the Balto-Slavic languages. Balto refers to the Baltic Sea, by the way. There are several language groups again, but guess what? You don't have to know them. I just want you to know these languages. But there's going to be a rub to this in a minute. Polish, Czech, Slovak, Slovenian. Serbo-Croatian, which is one language spoken by two ethnic groups, Serbs and Croats. But it's called Serbo-Croatian. It's the same language, though. Russian, Ukrainian, and Bulgarian. The thing is that there are two alphabets involved in these languages that I've mentioned so far. Two alphabets. Here's what they are. The Latin alphabet, which is the one that I am using, you are reading, you are looking at on the screen. It's the one I've been using the whole semester. The Latin alphabet comes from Latin, which comes from the Romans. And the Cyrillic alphabet, which comes from the Greeks. So it's a different alphabet. Although the Romans borrowed from the Cyrillic alphabet from the Greeks. The division mostly coincides with the location of the Western Roman Catholic and Protestant versions of Christianity. They use the Latin alphabet. And then the Eastern Orthodox versions of Christianity, they use the Cyrillic alphabet. Mostly that's the division. Now, before we go on to that anymore, I want to point this out too. When you have a written language, languages can either be phonetic or non-phonetic languages. Phonetic means that every letter represents the same sounds consistently. Non-phonetic means that doesn't happen. English is a non-phonetic language. Spanish is a phonetic language. So, for example, in English, we have this word that's spelled like this, C-O-U-G-H. How do you pronounce that word? Do you pronounce it Kougaha? Well, that would be a phonetic pronunciation of it, but it's pronounced cough, as if it's spelled K-A-F. What about this word? T-O-U-G-H. How do you pronounce that word? Yeah, you don't pronounce it Tougaha, right? It's pronounced tough. So English is not a phonetic language, but there are, of course, many phonetic languages. You have to have an alphabet, though, to have a phonetic language. This is the Russian alphabet, which is derived from Cyrillic. This is Cyrillic. Now, you look at some of these letters, you can see them. A, okay, it's pronounced A, just like you might expect it to be. But that letter that looks like a B in the Latin alphabet is actually a V in Russian, like Victor. This letter right here is the B, like boy. Then you have these other funky letters that we don't have. There's this letter, which is actually pronounced like it says there, yeah. Okay, M is pronounced like an M, so that one's okay. K is pronounced like a K. What looks like a C is actually pronounced more like an S or a TS kind of thing. Y is pronounced like oo, not Y. It's not pronounced like that. You can see this thing over here that looks like the number 3 is actually pronounced like the letter Z in the Latin alphabet. And you can see that this looks like a P. It's really an R in this alphabet. This is what the P looks like. So you can see that there's some crossover, but not a lot of crossover. Who uses which of these alphabets, the Latin alphabet and the Cyrillic alphabet, besides the religious breakup? Well, it basically goes like this. All the languages that I gave you up to Serbo-Croatian. So all of the languages in the Romance branch, sorry about that, all the languages in the Germanic branch, and many of the languages in the Balto-Slavic branch use the Latin alphabet. However, Once we hit that language Serbo-Croatian, this is where things flip over. So that the Serbian version of Serbo-Croatian is written in the Cyrillic alphabet. The Croatian version, same language, is written in the Latin alphabet. I know it's kind of weird, but that's the way it works. And then Russian, Ukrainian, and Bulgarian also all use the Cyrillic alphabet. Then these are the smaller branches. Remember, there's 4 smaller branches. There's Albanian or Illyrian, which is the Albanian language. So it's a language and a branch. Hellenic, which is the branch, which is modern Greek. So there's only one language that's associated with it anymore. The Celtic branch, which is Irish, Welsh, and Scottish, and a couple other smaller languages. The Armenian branch, which is just Armenian. And if you look at our tree, you can see I have them circled. In red, I have the Albanian, also known as Illyrian branch, and then you can see also in red the Celtic branch, and then over on the right-hand side, you can see the Armenian and the Hellenic branches circled in green. Okay, good job. Guess where we go next?